Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's state government reporters.
And here we are a week or so from the end of the fiscal year, and there's no budget in sight.
Yeah, still a long ways to go on that, and we're going to be sessioning in mid-July. That's clear.
Yeah, as both the House and the Senate leaders told us this week. But in the meantime, there's been a lot going on besides the budget. Probably the biggest story of the week is one our colleague Andy Spade broke on a Sunday night, of all things, having to do with a lawsuit filed against the Speaker of the House, Tim Moore.
Yeah, people be filing lawsuits on Father's Day now. I didn't know you could file a lawsuit on a Sunday, but he has been accused in an alienation of affection lawsuit, basically accused of having an affair with a married woman, breaking up their marriage. It seems like that marriage had all sorts of problems, as is perhaps not a surprise, and maybe they were separated. That is kind of the point of legal contention, is whether or not they were separated, how separated they were. The Speaker says he understood that that this woman was separated from her husband in the off and on relationship they had since 2019. I mean, the whole thing is a mess, and it's kind of difficult to watch because people's lives just kind of have disintegrated around this. But look, what's important from a political perspective, from a government perspective, is the Speaker of the House. It seems like over the years we keep hearing, oh, he's dating this person that's involved with state government or that person. Well, does he ever use his power as Speaker of the House to entice people or to get them a job, or it as kind of a latent threat? He says no.
Right, but that's something that Scott in the in the lawsuit, Scott Lasseter openly accuses him of that.
Right.
Of offering him favors. When he confronted him at a Biscuitville, of all places. Wouldn't you go to Bojangles for that, really? Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, not only a Biscuitville, the Biscuitville down the street from WRAL. So sorry we missed out on that, but it was the day after Christmas that apparently they met at that Biscuitville.
So there's an allegation very clearly made in that lawsuit that is exactly what happened, and he has said no, that's not the case. But when we look back, we resurfaced another story, and this is from 5 years ago.
2018.
Yeah, 5 years ago. And a woman who was at the time dating Speaker Moore.
Was his fiance at one point?
His fiance, yeah. Was the only person considered for a pair of state jobs. Is that right? Including one that created apparently for her?
Including one that had been created as part of a state budget bill. And the Speaker's office sent her resume and only her resume over to the Department of Insurance to try to get her the job that she did. Department of Insurance said she did a great job in it. But so there's just continually a little bit of smoke, and in that case, some fire. The Speaker again says, I have never used my political power, in my dating life. He's quite adamant about that. But I think that's, the line of this story is that question for me, as opposed to, well, did he know that she was separated? Or because alienation of affection, we're one of what, 3 states, 2 states?
2, I think.
That have this law where you can sue someone because they broke up your marriage allegedly.
And let me just point out at the woman as the woman at this table that these laws are really misogynist, right? Because they date back to the time when a woman was the man's property. So the whole idea of the heart balm tort, I guess is what it's called, is that you are getting your property, you're getting value for your property that has been stolen from you.
Yeah, and this may be repealed as a result of this. Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger said, "Nah, we're going to keep that," and the Speaker said, "Well, I think we maybe ought to repeal that one." Which again, I don't know why in this society we have to wait till something impacts us or a member of our family in order to believe, oh, maybe that was a problem, and maybe that'll come up when we talk about some of these transgender bills in a little bit. But before we move on to those things, so how does this affair that the Speaker had impact the budget process, the end of session? I had thought, well, maybe he wants to get out of session now, and he doesn't want to answer questions anymore, and so the Senate starts to win. I've been talking. He says no, that won't happen. Senator Berger says, if anything, the Speaker has been more available recently for budget negotiations, so it hasn't taken his time away from that. It seems like House Republicans are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach to some extent, but also I've heard from over and over again. I'm giving people anonymity here, so they have no reason to lie to me except for whatever reasons they may have to lie to me. But they say, yeah, we believe in the guy. This is a personal situation. He's been upfront about it. He told us about it in caucus on Tuesday. And, yeah, we still have confidence in the speaker, although there are clearly also people upset in the House Republican caucus. This is not a monolith by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
I liked this quote. I think there's some knives being sharpened, but nowhere to put them yet.
Well, and as you have pointed out, discovery in this case could be absolutely fascinating.
Right. How much into the rest of his personal life would a discovery process go? I don't know the answer to that.
In the meantime, Biscuitville showed up in the Senate. Now, was this a joke?
So the Senate had a meeting. Someone brought biscuits. It was Senator Amy Galey. She brought them from Biscuitville, but she said that Biscuitville is they started in Graham. That's in her district, and it was not a commentary on the speaker's meeting in Biscuitville, but a coincidence. But everything's interesting in this world.
In the meantime, while little progress was being made on the really big issues like the budget, lots of progress was being made on a bunch of culture war bills, as we like to call them. One was something that dropped really late yesterday in the afternoon. This was in the Senate. So they had finished their calendar, and all of a sudden they're like, let's go at ease until, for 20 minutes. And it's like, what's going on here? And they roll out they pull a bill out of committee into rules, and they drop into it this amendment that is a whole list of changes to the abortion law that they just passed that has not yet even taken effect. It takes effect a week from Saturday. And so these, now we talked to Senator Hayes after session. He said he was not really aware of the lawsuit because at the time they weren't a party to it. But it's pretty clear when you look at the lawsuit and you look at what's in the bill, I mean, they match up, right? They're fixing the things that the bill points out are internal inconsistencies and errors in the law.
Yeah, because a lawsuit filed by Planned Parenthood basically says the original bill you passed is so vague as to be unconstitutional. And there's a hearing in Greensboro Wednesday. I believe Judge Catherine Eagles' federal courtroom basically saying, hey, enjoin this. Don't let this go into effect July 1 as planned. It's unconstitutionally vague. And so this bill appears to be an attempt to clear up some of that vagueness. I mean, Republicans said, it's to clarify the law. Well, that's the same thing as addressing vagueness.
It shouldn't need to be clarified, should it? I mean,
well, ideally, no. And this thing dropped, and Democrats said they had about 15 minutes to look at it before it was on the floor. And I mean, start to finish, less than an hour. It had been voted through on a party line vote.
It still needs a final vote on Monday night, though.
That's right. But to get through the Senate, and then it's got to go to the House.
Right. But there are a couple of things that we should point out. Number one, of course, to back this up, the Senate leaders say, as you say, it's clarifying. It's merely technical. There's no real substantive changes in it. Yeah, there are actually. One of them is that it strikes a part that would make it a crime to advise someone to get an abortion. It keeps it like induce or assist or whatever. But I mean, if your doctor tells you that you have a fetal anomaly, they could actually be in trouble for advising you to do that. That's a clear First Amendment violation, right? And then another thing that's different is that even though the bill had said that that abortion would be legal for 12 weeks, it said in the bill also that medication abortion is only legal for 70 days, the first 70 days. So that's 10 weeks, not 12. So what they did yesterday is they clarified that medication abortion is allowed through 12 weeks. And what we were told by Senate leadership is that 70 days is the FDA guidelines for that medication abortion, but a lot of doctors use it to 12 weeks just fine.
Yeah, and we also had some news after this. So Attorney General Josh Stein, who's actually named in the lawsuit is not filed against the lawmakers, it's filed against the state. Josh Stein is the Attorney General of the state. He said, well, I actually agree with this lawsuit. I think I will not defend parts of this law because I think they are unconstitutional. Now, what parts won't he defend? Apparently, we have to wait for the court filing. His office would not clarify that Thursday evening. Senator Burgers, Speaker of the House Tim Moore have both filed. They have filed to intervene, which is, kind of always where these things tend to trend is that the lawmakers want to defend the law more vigorously than the Attorney General because the Attorney General is a Democrat and they're Republicans.
That's right. So anyway, so we'll know more on Wednesday, but they are hoping to block it before it goes into effect. It's not clear. We know that this bill is going to make it through the House this week. well, next week, we're
Yeah.
assuming. But the governor can sit on it for 10 days. So they're not going to have a finished, tidy bill to work with when they go to court.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like the judge isn't going to see this happen. I don't know how this impacts the lawsuit. A pending change to an existing law that has not yet gone into effect that someone is asking for a restraining order on. I don't know what that all adds up to. So
That's why she's the judge and not us, right?
Yep.
And then a lot of other stuff going on in the trans world. So, there really hasn't been much action on kind of anti-LGBTQ legislation since about 2016 and the whole fiasco surrounding HB2. But now they've got the supermajority in both the House and Senate, it's just kind of like, Katie bar the door. So just this week, we saw a flurry of these bills. There's a trans sports ban that bans transgender girls and women from high school and college sports.
And middle school. To the extent that's a thing.
Women's sports. And so that passed, got final passage on Thursday, passed the House with one Democrat in the House voting for it and one Democrat in the Senate. That is now headed to the governor's desk. We can expect, and I would expect a veto, almost certainly. Also, bills moving that would ban gender-affirming medical care for trans minors. Even if their parents consent, it would say that a doctor cannot provide puberty blockers, cannot provide hormone treatment, cannot do surgery until a child is 18. Now, the bills have different scopes. The House's bill would limit only state-affiliated and public hospitals, not private. The Senate bill would basically make it a crime, period, for a doctor to do that no matter where they work. The two are sort of racing to find each other, I guess, in a conference committee at some point. But those bills are all got action this week. And then also the Parents' Bill of Rights, which has been controversial. That one passed the House Education Committee this week and is probably going to reach the House floor next week. And this is one that some people were calling it the Don't Say Gay bill, which I don't think is quite fair because it doesn't limit. If a child asks a teacher a question about something, the teacher can answer it. But it does say that there can't be any mention of sexual orientation or gender identity in grades K through 4 curriculum or classroom materials. And it also still has the language in it where a teacher is, for example, schools are required to get a parent's consent before a child can use different pronoun or use a different name at school. Even if it's Jim wants to be Jimmy, they have to tell the parents first before they can do that. We know that trans kids often socially transition in school before they do at home because the stakes are lower, right? If you tell a teacher and the teacher doesn't approve, it's a little bit different than the risk of getting kicked out of your house. Big difference,
Yeah.
So anyway, and teachers under this bill would be encouraged to facilitate discussions with families of sensitive issues.
Yeah, and I mean the concern is not everybody lives in the same type of home, right?
Right.
Not everyone's parents are going to be accepting of this. So the concern is that this will cause anxiety, that this may cause abuse because and more likely a chilling effect where the kid just doesn't tell anybody.
Exactly.
And,
when you look at this from a trans kid's point of view, these bills are designed to make you not be able to talk to anyone at school, not be able to feel at home in your body, and not play sports. And, that's just a lot.
Yeah, and look, these things are hard to understand if you don't have any lived experience or don't know someone who has gone through it, and I don't. But I am always paying attention when someone stands up on the House or Senate floor and begs the other side not to do something or to do something and says, this, Representative John Autry has a granddaughter who he has spoken about many times who transitioned. And when someone with that lived experience, how many transgender people are consulted in this process? It doesn't seem like...
My guess is none.
Yeah. And I mean, wherever you come down on the issue, don't you think that conversation needs to happen? And I mean, again, these are hard issues because, I mean, these are kids in a lot of cases.
These are kids. And, I will tell you, I have a nephew who is transgender. And I will tell you that is life-saving treatment. Mm-hmm. Not in every case, right? And not in every single case. And I think there are probably discussions to be had about how far a child should be allowed to transition and when and who should be in charge of that and what process that should have to go through. But I think to simply put a blanket ban on it and say no child can have this, I think you're going to see a lot more suicidal kids is what I'm worried about. So anyway, we'll have to wait and see, obviously.
Yeah, it's tough to write a law. it's tough to write a law that's a showstopper.
Yeah, and well, it's another example of as Senator Sidney Batch pointed out this week. In the Parents' Bill of Rights, we're saying parents have the right to make all the health decisions for their kids, except in this case for the trans kids. Then no, they're not allowed to make that decision.
Yeah, and I guess that goes both ways. I mean, maybe Republicans could fire back and say, well, if it's the same argument, why are you voting differently on these two bills, Senator Batch? But
Yeah, I suppose so.
yeah.
Also,
Voting bills, though, I think we want to hit.
absolutely. And there's two of these that moved this week. These are the bills that were filed in the Senate, Senate Bill 747 and 749. And this is a couple of really pretty wide-ranging bills that have passed the state Senate. Looks like they're headed for the House next. And I think you found out, didn't you ask about it? And the House said they were pretty much on board.
Yeah, that was a little while back. I seem to remember the speaker saying they might want some tweaks to what I'll call the omnibus bill that deals with absentee ballot rules, et cetera. But he said that the other bill, which deals with the makeup of the state and county boards of elections, taking them from majority Democrat right now because the governor is a Democrat, it's based on the governor's party, to split evenly between Republicans and Democrats. He said that came out of a conversation between he and Senate President Pro Tem Berger. So that one sounds like a done deal.
Well, and this isn't the first time
Except for
they've
the
tried
lawsuit
this.
that will.
Yeah, this isn't the first time they've tried this. They tried this in 2016. When Cooper was coming into office, they decided to change the Board of Elections to the Board of Elections Ethics and something else, and they made it an even number, and then they went to court, and it had to be an odd number because an even-numbered board may not take any action at all. CRFEC on the national level, for example, they've done almost nothing in years because that's an evenly split board.
Yeah, and the tie on some key issues would be broken by the legislature. Yeah, the biggest key issue is, well, who is going to be the state director of elections? That's something decided by the board, and it would be the General Assembly picking if they could not come to an agreement on this one. So, it'll pass, and the governor will veto it, both of them, and then we'll have more election lawsuits.
It is worth noting that in 2018, there was an amendment on the ballot asking voters to approve a constitutional amendment to put the legislature in charge of managing the Board of Elections, and it was defeated like 2-1.
Yeah.
So I think the voters have spoken, but clearly nobody's listening. Also going on, reg reform. You've been covering this bill.
Yeah, this is House Bill 600, and the Southern Environmental Law Center calls it, quote, a polluter's wish list. So that's probably not good. Makes it harder to regulate PFAS. Those are the forever chemicals that we've all got in our blood and that Chemours is pumping out down in near the Bladen and Cumberland County line. Also 1,4-dioxane, which is a carcinogen. The SCLC says it violates the Federal Clean Water Act, that it also curtails states' ability to stop large projects like the Mountain Valley Pipeline, for example. It's got some hog waste changes in it. This bill was set to move through Senate rules, but it got pulled. I was told it would change in committee, in a lower committee, but it's still in rules last I checked. Colin Campbell with WNC told me that he's hearing some changes may be coming on the Senate floor. I couldn't get DEQ to engage with me on this. There are no comment on it.
It is pending legislation. Yeah.
Sure, but when a group says it's a polluter's wish list and violates the Federal Clean Water Act, it does seem like the governor's administration could
say that,
could publicly speak on it in some way. But yeah, I assume negotiations are ongoing on that. Where they land, I do not know. But I think H600 reg reform is one to watch as we kind of come down the last stretch of this session.
Coming up next week on Wednesday, we're anticipating a handful of override votes. At least they think Wednesday, depending on attendance. But these are bills that were all overridden in the Senate earlier this week. Two of them are kind of consumer finance bills. As I understood it, both of these were sort of worked out with stakeholders, and it was a compromise position. But Cooper vetoed them anyway because it will result in higher fees and costs for
higher interest rates
for borrowers. But at the same time, the lenders can say, yeah, but our cost of business has gone up too. So, we got to make money. And then they all – and the other one was the local government.
Basically, it says if you're a local government and you don't submit a required state audit on time,
right,
the state can hold off on giving you some sales tax revenue as a kind of a stick approach to getting you to do what you need to do there.
Right. And so Woodard voted in favor of the veto overrides on those.
Yeah, Senator Mike Woodard was the only Democrat to vote against the governor on that. I guess I should have talked to him about that and asked him why. But
Well, I know he was a former city councilman in Durham.
yeah.
And it may be that as an experienced city councilman, he may say, you know what, cities need to get their audits.
Well, this was also a big surprise too. I don't think anyone expected the governor to veto these bills, and they had bipartisan support. I mean, all the Democrats except for Woodard came home and backed the governor on it. But I mean, a bunch of Democrats had voted for all these bills, so it was a surprise that they also vetoed S 364. That's the no DEI or woke hiring bill. 3 Democrats had voted for that one: Batch, Bodie, and Smith in the Senate, but all came home for the override vote back in the governor there. But there, of course.
Well, those swing district folks too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And but that one will go over to the House, and like you said, probably Wednesday of next week. All 4 of those bills will be overridden in the House if attendance is good. But we're getting people. It's tight margins, even though Republicans have these super majorities, and so attendance matters. Everybody's got to do the math every day on these overrides. We all often talk about that as a thing that Democrats have to focus on, but Republicans have to deal with it as well.
Right. And then we've done a series, I guess, of stories, 5 on Your Side has, on the recouping retirement overpayments and a new issue dealing with disability payments. And this is really kind of crazy, the idea that the state can overpay you for years and you can even question it and the state can tell you, no, it's right. And then they can say, come after you, you owe us $2 million or...
Right, and in these cases, it's the treasurer's office, so Treasurer Dale Folwell, who's running for governor, of course, and they've been pursuing recouping money from various people. And they, again, like you said, 5 on Your Side, so look for those stories. But this is the most interesting part of it. Apparently, they were relying on a misprinted law to cancel disability payouts and then tried to recoup more than $2 million of those payouts from former government workers. And it's something like $3,000 to $264,000 from each individual. So, I mean, large amounts. And it was just a printing error that led to this. Folwell's office wouldn't do an interview. That's unusual for Dale Folwell's office.
Yeah.
But as soon as the mistake was found, they corrected it. Although we found at least one woman that had to hire an attorney before she got her money back.
I'm just trying to imagine just the stress that this would cause a retired person. Like you owe the state $50,000. What are you going to pay that with?
Yeah, and there's some dialogue about what state code says and how much flexibility the treasurer has in trying to recoup these things and whether or not we have given the proper amount of flexibility.
Because I don't think he has any flexibility.
He doesn't have a ton, as I understand it, and I'd need to understand it better, I think, before going too much further on that.
Anyway, we also learned this week that Beth Wood is running for re-election. She is not going to let the incident last Christmas stop her. She says she has moved on past that, and she thinks the voters will too.
And she may be right. I don't know. I assume she will obviously have a Republican running against her. I don't know if she'll have a Democrat running against her or not. I think that's the most interesting question there. Just does she have to fend off a Democratic primary would this be her you know what? I'm not going to go on memory. I don't remember how many terms she served, but it's been a little while.
It's been a while. She won after Les Merritt. So she's been, let's see.
Shout out to someone named Les Merritt able to win a statewide election.
Hey, he did. Yeah, he did. He got a term as treasurer. So we should mention session plans. Berger said, Senate Leader Phil Berger said yesterday that they are planning to shut down committee work after next week. So that usually means the end is nigh, although it doesn't look like it's that nigh. They're planning to take the week of July 4th off. Everybody goes home and then comes back.
Yeah, and when we see a budget, I don't know. I mean, the budget updates from leadership are pretty repetitive at this point. They're still divided.
And multiple issues. They're not down to like a single issue yet.
Yeah, still tax package, one-time money, all these things that you've been hearing us and others say are dividing them, continue to divide them. Did you say we're taking July 4th week off?
Yep.
So we'll take that off, and we'll come back after that.
And you had a story yesterday about medical marijuana. I think I've gotten more viewer emails about this bill than anything else we've covered this session, but it looks like it may be in trouble.
Yeah, it polls really well. Medical marijuana in the state polls at like 72%.
Even among Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, among all voters. And so we mentioned that marathon caucus session that House Republicans had on Tuesday. And of course, it's hard to get anybody to tell you what specifically was discussed. But I mean, they basically mapped out the rest of the session, which means they talked about medical marijuana. The speaker, in gaggling with reporters, wouldn't talk specifically about that bill, about what bills they talked about. But he said, look, I continue to believe that unless a bill has majority support in the House Republican caucus, it's not going to move forward. That's the
Hastert rule,
the Dennis Hastert rule, yeah. And so that's what's happening there. He said he indicated is that it doesn't have majority support. Now, why is that? I've heard kind of a theory that, well, social conservatives have been asked to swallow a lot this session.
That's true. I mean, you've got the 12-week ban on abortion when a lot of them wanted a heartbeat bill. You've got the sports gambling. You've got some talk of casinos. I mean, yeah, they've had a lot to swallow.
Medicaid expansion too. And one person told me that, you know what? I bet if medical marijuana had moved before sports gambling, it'd be sports gambling that was struggling to get over the edge here. Also, of course, the medical marijuana bill, Bill Rabin's bill, he's the rules chairman in the Senate. He has a lot of sway over the House agenda, whether what does and doesn't move. So, I mean, it's totally usual for hostages to be taken, for leverage to be sought. You don't move our bills, I won't move your bills. And then it's also totally normal for that to just clear up like that. So
let the floodgates open. Once a deal is struck. Yeah, and actually, I think it was this week or maybe late last week that Senator Rabin actually made a point about that in committee. There's a lot of House bills on this agenda. We're very friendly today. Look at all these House bills on this agenda. So, yeah, he's definitely pointing it out.
And Rabin told me he's not worried about the bill, that plenty of time. So, yeah, we'll see. It's always dangerous at this point in the session to write about, a bill's foundering. You can look.
And tomorrow.
Real dumb. Real
tomorrow the bill moves, right? It never fails. Anyway, you had a really cool story that some people may not have seen. I know last weekend was a holiday weekend, with Father's Day, but there's another Mark Robinson.
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to mention this even though it's about a week old at this point, but he's a Democrat from Sampson County. He wants to run for governor or lieutenant governor. His name is Mark H. Robinson, as opposed to current Lieutenant Governor Mark K. Robinson. This Mark Robinson's got a bus. He's on a tour. I mean, he's not like wealthy. He's just kind of doing this himself. Hasn't filed any paperwork or anything, even though he probably should have. But he's just really an interesting guy. I went into this not knowing what to expect, and I kind of came out of it thinking, I'm glad I met this guy, and I'm writing about him.
It's really interesting because when reading your story, I remember when you had first mentioned this to me, and his website was really vague about a lot of his background, but his background is really fascinating.
Yeah. He served in the Navy, retired as a captain, got an MBA from Duke University. So he's a serious person who seems to be running a fairly amateurish statewide political campaign. I don't know what that adds up to, but it's an interesting story. Folks ought to look it up.
Anyway, next week, things that we'll be watching out for, there's an obscenity bill that is moving in committee next week. So that could be the onslaught continues there because that may actually have to do, well, we don't know yet what that's going to apply to. And then also Consumers in Crisis, which is a legal lending bill, is one that we're watching. It keeps picking up really interesting amendments, too. So some things to be watching. And, of course, those veto overrides in the House.
Yeah, and, the abortion hearing and the abortion amendment moving.
Oh, and the two SCOTUS decisions. We're a week away from the end of the term of the Supreme Court, and we're still waiting on decisions on an affirmative action case that is, at least UNC is one of the parties to it. And then another case, that's the Moore v. Harper.
Yeah.
That was the one that they argued about the independent state legislature theory. That was back in December.
Yeah, redistricting.
Yeah, redistricting. So we're waiting to hear whether or not the court's going to weigh in on that or not.
Yeah, and I bet other stuff will come up that we don't even know about yet.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll tune in next week here on The Wrap.